Hello everyone, this is this is module 1 for the 5th and 6th grade video series titled Answering the Prompt. Here are our objectives in the corner right here. Oh, and before we begin, make sure to follow along with our 5th and 6th grade video series worksheet, which is linked on our website and it's right by the video. And there's going to be notes and practice prompts on there. So what is a prompt? A prompt is a statement or question that asks you to explore a topic or theme. So here are some examples of prompts, and you can read through them. One of them is write an essay that discusses the significance of symbolism in The Great Gatsby and how it reflects Fitzgerald's overarching themes. And another is how does Gatsby's house reflect Gatsby's progression as a character, minimum 1 paragraph with evidence from the book. So here are the steps to answering the prompt. You're going to read the prompt fully through, and you can always do this a couple of times just so you are really able to grasp and comprehend what the prompt is exactly asking you, because the second step is to ask yourself the 3 analytical questions and answer them, and this is to process your thoughts. The third step is to respond to the prompt using the 3 method, which consists of a thesis, evidence, and explaining. Which stand for, and this is like the acronym for it, and then the R from the 3 we take out and we use to review in your response and revise at the end. And of course, we're going to go through our checklist at the very end as well. The first step is analyzing the prompt. So in order to analyze and understand the prompt, we can ask ourselves, what is the prompt asking me and what is it looking for? How does it want me to answer? Sometimes prompts ask you to answer in an essay format or a paragraph or a short answer, sometimes just a simple statement. And third, why is the prompt important? So you may have been discussing a theme or class or reading a book that covers specific themes. So if you're having a prompt in class, then maybe your teacher wants you to tie it back to that. And it's important for us to ask ourselves this because you want to be learning as you answer these prompts. The next step is using the 3 method. So when we're ready to answer the prompt, we can use the 3 method, which consists of 3 parts. The first part is the thesis, and this responds directly to the prompt. This is a statement that sums the rest of your response up into 1 sentence, and your thesis acts as your starting point. So everything else from your response is going to build off of your thesis. The second part of the 3 method is evidence. So you use evidence in your response to support your thesis. And then the last part is explain. So lastly, you always want to explain the evidence in your own words because it shows that you actually understand the prompt. And of course, after answering the prompt, it is always important to review and revise your response, which is where the R from the 3 comes from. We also have a checklist. So this is at the very end. After you've answered the prompt, we can go through this checklist to make sure that we have everything. So the first part of the checklist is I answered all the questions. The second is I have evidence, and the third is I explain the evidence in my own words. Now, as you're going through the checklist at the very end, if you circle no for anything, that's absolutely okay, but you may need to revisit your response to the prompt and see where you can make your thesis clear, provide sufficient evidence, or explain more in your own words, depending on which answer or which part of the checklist you said no for. And this is always okay because practice makes perfect, and we always want to ensure our response covers everything. So now we're going to go through an example using one of the prompts from earlier. How does Gatsby's house reflect Gatsby's progression as a character? Minimum 1 paragraph with evidence from the book. Now the first step is to read the prompt fully through, which is what we just did. And it's always okay to go back and read it again. I know I have to do that sometimes to really process what the prompt is asking me for. And now we're going to ask ourselves the analytical questions. So as if you can recall, the first question was, what is the prompt asking me to do? So in this prompt, the prompt is asking me to connect Gatsby's house with Gatsby's progression as a character. The second question was, how does the prompt want me to answer? And for this prompt, I have to answer with at least 1 paragraph plus evidence. And the third question is, why is the prompt important and what can we learn? And so this prompt is important because it's forcing me to think deeper about symbolism and metaphors. So the third step for this example is respond using the 3 method and also reviewing and revising at the end. So I went ahead and I responded to this prompt and we're going to go through it together. So my first part of the three method, or the first part of the three method, is a thesis. And so my thesis was, in The Great Gatsby, Fitzgerald uses Gatsby's house to reflect Gatsby's own progression as a character through imagery. And then for the evidence part of the three method, I have Gatsby's house is described as, quote from book, and Gatsby himself mirrors this through his opulent yet quiet happiness. When he meets Daisy, the love of his life, his house is described from, quote from book, as if to reflect his own, quote from book. At the very end, his house is, quote from book, overgrown and like a tomb, much like his own self, which is now described as, quote from book. So that serves as the evidence portion of the three method for my response. And for the last part of the three method, which is explained, I have Fitzgerald uses the imagery of Gatsby's house in all its sparkling rich splendor at the beginning and neglected hollowness at the end to reflect Gatsby's innermost self, his soul. At the start of The Great Gatsby, Gatsby is loved by all, throws an immense number of parties, and is the face of high society, revered and known. His house is lit by those captivating party lights, seen everywhere as flaming as the sun. As his love for Daisy overwhelms him, though, his house becomes neglected, much like he has. Soon the great party of his life will end, his house closed like a tomb, empty, dark, and dead, with no one to remember him or celebrate in his home. Through the imagery of Gatsby's house, Fitzgerald is able to convey the ups and downs of Gatsby's life, even to his end. So we can see also here that throughout my response, I also included some transitions between the different parts of the three methods so it could be more cohesive. The last part is, oh, I got covered. Sorry, the fourth step is to go through the checklist. And so the first part of the checklist is I answered all the questions, and we can check this off and say yes, because the question we were asked was, how does Gatsby's house reflect Gatsby's progression as a character? And I said through imagery, and further explained that through the rest of my response. So that one is done. The second part of the checklist is I have evidence, and we can also check this off the list and say yes, because I used 5 pieces of evidence as direct quotes from the book. And here is the whole part of my evidence as well. The last portion of the checklist is I explain the evidence in my own words, and we can also check this off the list and say yes, because in this whole last portion here, I explained all the evidence from this section in my own words and also connected it back to the thesis at the very end. Okay, so now it is your turn to practice, because practice makes perfect. And so there's practice prompts. If you've been following along on the worksheet, there are practice prompts at the very end. And there's 2 that are like the quote style that we did in the example. And there's one where you're going to use reasoning as evidence instead of quotes. So that one might be a little extra challenge or even more fun, because you get to think a lot more and reflect on some things. And so if you want to do more practice prompts, it'll be on that page and it's on our website. And of course, thank you.